How's everybody? You know, I figured you all were here today. You know why? Today is January the 6th. 30 days. 30 days on the job. I just thought I'd remind you all. So y'all can give me a big round of applause. Thank you. But I know that's not why you really are here. So let me just say, in light of the recent events, the media exposures and counts related to crime and violence in Baltimore, I just felt that it was really necessary to hold this press conference and to provide you with an update on the efforts related to police staffing and discussions with the FOP, which is kind of interesting because I was just at their Christmas party a few weeks ago and said to them, you know, I welcome the opportunity to have a discussion because I know that you all have been in negotiations, but certainly no negotiations have taken place since I've come to office. But I'm really concerned about some of the things that have been said, and I want you to know that one of the things I do very carefully is look at every agency, analyze their budgets, and one of the first questions I raised with our budget analysts was in the, I think it was last year's budget, I was looking at the freezing of police officers' position, and I said, have you evaluated that and juxtaposed that to what that cost might be as it relates to overtime? And I'm not so sure that that was really done. I'm really concerned that we make sure that the citizens of our city are safe. I'm very concerned that we make sure that our city is clean. And so I tell folks, and I've told this to my staff, you will never hear me say, when we're looking at our budgets, in areas that we will cut, it will not be in patrol. It won't be the firemen who have to answer fires whenever they occur in our city. And it won't be sanitation workers who have to keep our city clean. That's not how we will do things in this administration. And so when I looked at just at, for example, the overtime that has occurred as a result of the current contract that is in place, we incur something like $1.6 million every pay period. You know, overtime has become a matter of fact. And so when I look at the current schedule that was negotiated, where we have 4 days on, 3 days off. I mean, I expect that with the fire department because they actually sleep at the firehouse and, you know, we don't know when fires occur and we want to make sure. I believe that the hands of delivering schedules for our police officers should be in the hands of the police commissioner. It should not be a negotiation in a contract. We're currently under a one-year contract that has been going on and on and on. I think it was first negotiated in June of 2013 or 14, before I got here. And so, as I said to Jean, I look forward to sitting down with the FOP, but one of the things I will tell you that is very important to me, as many of you know, it was important to me when I went to Annapolis last year, is that we have civilians sitting on the trial boards. And I said that to Jean when I spoke to him at the Christmas party. I had to wait for him because he was doing some paperwork. And so I had a chance to sit down with some of the officers and eat while I was waiting. And when he finally came in, I said, look forward to talking with you, Gene, but the negotiations begin with citizens sitting on our trial boards. That is important to the people of our city. They've asked for it. Now, I've not totally evaluated what 4 and 3 means, you know, 4 days off, on, 3 days off. What I do know is it gives you 156 days off without even considering your vacation. Average, I think for most of us, I think you all work on average, what, 5 days a week? So 104 days. So our police officers who are on patrol get an additional 36 days. That's not counting vacation. I just don't think that belongs in our negotiations. I want police officers to know their communities. I want them to be able to walk their neighborhoods and their communities. I want folks who are sitting behind desks, who have the ability to be on patrol, to be patrolling our city and neighborhoods and get to know the people in the neighborhoods and communities. One of the things that was disturbing to me is that we don't have enough police officers who live in our city. And so I want to say this to all of Baltimore. We're hiring. We need people from Baltimore to step up to the plate. You know, I recruited my neighbor who lived across the street from me, a young man, and another young man, about a couple months ago, who's now a police cadet. We have staffed up in our academy currently. about 87 patrolmen who will end up on the streets of our city very quickly. And I think the commissioner will have some other news for you. I want our officers to be safe. I want them to be able to have the educational opportunities that they should have. I want our police officers to know that I care about them. As the mayor of this city, I think it's very important for me to understand everything that's going on in every agency. So I've taken the time to do the analysis as I see it, and talking with our police commissioner on a regular basis, and more importantly, talking with our finance people as well, and to let them know what the agenda of this administration will be. We will have police officers patrolling our city. I thank the FOP for letting us know how they feel, but I want them to also know how I feel. I want everyone who has the capacity and the capability, who have been hired by our police department to patrol, to get on patrol, and let's get Baltimore safer. You know, again, let's get to know the neighbors, let's get to know the community, and again, I'm going to make it very clear. Civilians sitting on our trial boards are important to the neighborhoods, important to the communities. They've asked for it, and we're going to make sure that they have it. And the other issue that concerns me is strengthening our civilian review board. We will do that as a part of this administration. As you all well know, we are currently in negotiations with the DOJ. We're close. We're getting very close. My folks worked last night past midnight. I got a text around 2 a.m. in the morning. Are you still up? I want you all to know I gladly work this job every single day. My days are 12 to 14 hours a day, and I can't wait to get up in the morning to come do this work. So I'm excited about the future of our city. I'm excited about working with our police officers, with our FOP, and again, I just want to repeat, the thing that I will not do is shortchange our citizens as it relates to people on patrol, firemen who cover our neighborhoods and our communities, and sanitation workers who clean up our city. So with that, I want to turn it over to the police commissioner, and I think you have some things you'd like to share.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mayor, and good morning to everyone. The negotiations actually ended just after 1 a.m. And
Yeah.
I was across the street in my office, and the mayor was getting constant updates. So there's a real energy associated with these negotiations that Baltimore needs to know about. We're serious about it. We're working day and night, and we're working very, very hard to get something done, pragmatic reform
I think
for
I
our
talked to
city.
you, what, around midnight last night?
Once or twice.
Yeah, a couple times.
So, no, the mayor is, I'm on her speed dial and vice versa. So I just want to say right off the bat, the mayor talked about staffing. So I sat down yesterday with several members of my executive command staff, and we identified 100 police officers who are currently not assigned to the patrol districts that will be reassigned to our patrol districts this month. So that's 100 police officers who are not currently assigned to our 9 patrol districts, and they will be reassigned to our patrol districts this month.
And that doesn't count the 87 cadets that are coming out of
That doesn't count them. So we realize the importance of patrol. The responsibility to our community begins and ends with our patrol officers. You've heard it said by more than one police commissioner and more than one jurisdiction that patrol is the backbone of any effective police department, and I firmly believe that. We also have other responsibilities like investigations and training and compliance. So all those things are important, but it begins and ends with patrol. So I'm looking forward to those 100 police officers going back to patrol this month. And the only reason they can't go back tomorrow is because we have some notifications that are built in to their scheduling. So I really want to say something to the moms and dads that I don't necessarily see at community meetings, but I stand with them in their living rooms, and I talk to them on the telephone, and I meet with them in my office. And those are the most meaningful encounters I have, particularly with the moms and dads, because they say to me, as they've said to you all in your profession more than one time, that they're afraid what might happen to their son or daughter, particularly their sons, when their son or sons leave the house to go to work, leave the house to go to school, leave the house to just interact in the neighborhood, and they're fearful of what may happen to their sons. And that's a real pain that people have. And the moms that have lost sons to violence, and we have more than one family that has lost more than one son to violence in our city, have a deep pain that's easily observed, but it's hard to grasp if you haven't gone through that type of pain yourself. So I don't pretend to know exactly every aspect and facet of their emotions, but I know that they're in pain. And I know the police department has a solemn responsibility to do something for those moms and dads who are going to be watching this tonight on the news, reading about this in the newspaper. So our commitment to public safety is real. We take it very, very seriously. Probably the most productive thing I've done in a while is get on a bus with the mayor and drive around West Baltimore and Northwest Baltimore, identifying real problems that certainly have to do with public safety, but they have so much more to do with every other aspect of good government. So
When it gets warm, we're going to be walking.
we'll be walking. So for the moms out there who have anxieties about the crime, to the dads, to the families raising teenagers and young people, and they're struggling to make ends meet, we want them to feel better about their sons and daughters, particularly their sons, leaving the house. And I get that, and I hear that all the time, and it hits home with me. In 2016, we had 318 victims of murder. 318. 86% of those crimes were committed by using a handgun. 81% occurred outdoors on our streets, outdoors. 70% of our murder victims were under the age of 34. 92% of our murder victims were male. 93% of our victims were African American. 59% were shot multiple times. And I think that was reported recently by Kevin Rector. 85% of our victims, and this is something that should touch us all. 85% of our murder victims had criminal records with an average of 11 arrests per victim. We're not serving these people well. And by we, I mean society, government.
Well, and one of the, and I just need to stop you right there, because one of the things that the commissioner does on a regular basis is he provides us with crime stat data. And I went to my first crime stat meeting, and I'm sitting there, and I said, hold it, just stop for a minute. Commissioner, you're giving us the information, but where is the health department? Where is human services? Where's substance abuse? All of us need to, where are the schools? Everybody needs to be around the table to solve these problems. When I took our cabinet on a tour, I looked around the bus and I felt like there were people who had never met each other. If we don't work together and utilize our resources together, we don't solve these problems. Because police can't reduce crime by themselves. Part of it is what the community does. The other part of it is what we do in terms of providing the services that the community wants. And so I'm so glad that you recognize these issues and he understands the problem, and that's why I think he is a great commissioner for Baltimore, but that he really gets it. But we need everybody to get it, every agency head to get it, every community leader to pitch in. And I told folks, I don't want to have community conversations where everybody's telling us what's wrong. I want to have conversations where we're telling you what we're doing and how we can interact and improve our relationships with the community and improve how we deliver our services to people in our city. We have a responsibility, but everybody out there has a responsibility as well. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, man, it's couldn't possibly say it any better than that. So just last look back at 2016, our murders, our rapes, our burglaries were each down 7%. And that's not acceptable to only be down by that percentage, because we've got a long, long way to go. And quite frankly, it was a historically violent year in our city. Our homicide closure rate jumped by 8 percentage points last year, still not where it needs to be. Our Crime Stoppers tips for homicides increased by 174% in 2016 versus 2015. And I think that speaks to the community engagement, people wanting to get involved. Our thefts were down 6%. Our gun arrests, and we talked about that a lot. I think the illegal possession of a gun is a crime of pre-murder. Our gun arrests were up 14%, but our non-fatal shootings were also up by 5%. And our robberies, and that's been reported about by you all, some high-profile robbery cases, robbery as a motive drove our homicides this year. Our robberies were up 16% citywide, but when we look at what drove our robberies, juveniles, our juvenile arrests for the crime of robbery jumped 30%, yet our robberies continue to jump. So I know the mayor has spoken about this. We've got to do more with intervention for families and schools with these people, these young people who are getting into a life of crime way too early. 2016 saw trials and court proceedings for 6 Baltimore police officers. We endured the 1-year anniversary of the death of Freddie Gray. Many prognosticators predicted additional unrest. That didn't happen, and I think that speaks to the community. It speaks to the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department, and it really speaks to our chaplains program, because they were the unsung heroes of many of those interactions. We got through a Department of Justice investigation that lasted 14 months to include their findings report, 163 pages. And we got through a year where protest, almost one a day, consumed over 100,000 man-hours in 2016, 100,000. And let's really not kid ourselves about attrition. So over the last couple of years, our attrition rate, the number of people resigning, the number of people quitting, the number of people retiring, has exceeded our hiring rate. And that, frankly, and you all have asked me this question on numerous occasions, and I'm just going to reiterate it to you, the unprecedented events of 2015 and the unrest, we really saw people leave this organization. They retired, they resigned, but we saw many more people decide to stay with this organization and fight through this moment. And so I applaud the police officers who stayed. I really applaud the police officers who were eligible to retire and decided to stay anyway, because that takes courage and it takes commitment, and I really just applaud them. So frankly, we're still recovering from the impact of attrition that occurred back in 2015. We had to cancel academy classes in 2015, and you pay for that for a couple years. So that's something the mayor touched on in terms of us hiring more police officers and getting back up to where we need to be. So our 2017 crime fighting strategy is a data-driven, hyper-focus on geographic zones and people and places. Geographic zones, people, and places. So we'll focus on murders, non-fatal shootings, first-degree aggravated assaults, robberies, burglaries, auto thefts, and reported 911 firearms discharging. So how did we come up with these geographical zones? How did we pick these areas throughout our city that are going to receive this hyper-focus? Based on data, objective crime data. We are dedicating full-time teams of centralized and decentralized discretionary detectives and operational units that will work exclusively in these zones. That's something we were not able to do in 2016 and in 2015 because a lot of these discretionary detectives and operational officers were used for mobile field force. They were used to handle protests that occurred throughout the city. We have narrowed our trigger pullers list, and we've talked a lot about that. We're dedicated to looking at the small number of people who are disproportionately responsible for violence in our city. We narrowed that list from about 600 to 132. And of those 132 bad guys on our trigger pullers list, there are teams of detectives and operational units who are assigned to make sure they're behaving themselves. So 132 trigger pullers. The focus of the BPD and our federal law enforcement officers on the Black Guerrilla family, the BGF. We indicted over 100 BGF gang members in 2016. Apparently that's not enough. They have a war going on within their own organization between certain facets, and that violence that they're committing is on one another, and it's spilling out to other drug organizations in our community. So 2017, we'll see an increased focus on BGF with our federal partners. Patrol productivity, meaningful productivity, getting out of your car. And by patrol productivity, this isn't the old days where patrol productivity is synonymous with go arrest somebody for standing on a corner. Patrol productivity is getting out of your car and introducing yourself, stopping in to see a merchant, introducing yourself to a woman sitting with her child on her front steps. That's patrol productivity, meaningful contact with people. We will continue our very effective relationship with our state's attorney. Marilyn Mosby, as you know, stood up her gun violence enforcement division, where she has dedicated full-time gun prosecutors, and we have dedicated detectives who work full-time with them. We have doubled the number of training hours for police officers in 2017 in Baltimore. The state of Maryland requires 40 hours. We are requiring 80 hours every police officer in 2017. We will have a focus on training for police officers with characteristics of an armed person training, because that makes them better crime fighters, and the always important de-escalation training when it comes to interacting with people who exhibit signs and behaviors of mental illness and developmental disabilities. So, and of course, I'll be back in Annapolis, where I used to see the mayor more often than I'll see her now,
Right.
to strengthen the consequences for those who commit that crime of pre-murder. Leaving your house with a gun stuck in your waistband, and you're angry, and that gun is used all too often to resolve simple conflict. So I'll echo what the mayor said, and I think I'll look at that camera and say the same thing.
Baltimore, we're hiring.
And I think unless the mayor has
Police
anything to add. Yeah, police officers. I think.
In case.
Questions?
Question.
We'll take questions.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Kenny Burns, WYPR Radio. Are the main sticking points between the city and the FOP regarding scheduling and civilians on police board?
Who's Kenny Burns? Oh, that's you. Okay, fine. You said Kenny Burns. I thought you were saying, okay, go ahead. Kenny, go ahead. You know he was out. He's back in. But go ahead, Kenny.
Glad to be back in. Are the main sticking points between the city and the FOP regarding the scheduling and civilians on the trial boards, or is
I don't know what, I haven't had a conversation other than happy New Year. Have a great time. Look forward to sitting down with you. Looking forward to having a conversation. But just know that when we sit down, my main sticking point is going to be civilians on trial boards. That's what the neighborhoods want. That's what the community want. Looking forward to that phone call. Let's get together. Thumbs up. Let's do it. I'm waiting for it. But we won't wait any longer. I'll give them a call.
The union said that the number that was agreed to with the department in the contract that was suitable for the 10-4 shift was 1,250 patrol officers. In your community policing report, the department said it had 999 on sector patrol. The union says it's far lower than that, at 700. Do you know exactly how many officers are on sector patrol? And can you speak to the union's claim that the 1,250 was an agreed to number as a minimum for what you need?
Sure. So, Kevin, not unlike the mayor, I think that perceived discrepancy should have been resolved with a phone call or a face-to-face meeting. Because the fact of the matter is we reported the number of police officers who are dedicated to the patrol effort on the Baltimore Police Department pursuant to what House Bill 771 requires, and we included in that number patrol sergeants and patrol lieutenants. Now, the collective bargaining agreement, and again, that collective bargaining agreement that currently exists was negotiated before the unrest. The Baltimore Police Department never had the number of police officers required to staff that 4 days on, 3 days off schedule going into it. Never had it. I guess there was some hope that we would somehow catch up with it, but we never had that number to begin with. And then frankly, Kevin, the unrest hit and the attrition skyrocketed. So there's no such thing necessarily as a bad shift plan, but your shift plan is only as good as your capacity to staff it. So as you look at the attrition and the size of the agency, we don't have a capacity to staff that type of shift plan. It doesn't mean the shift plan is bad, but what's unusual about Baltimore and this collective bargaining agreement is that it's never been my experience, and I've been in 3 organizations, 3 police departments in Maryland, that the shift schedule is negotiated into a collective bargaining agreement. That is something that is traditionally in America's 18,000 police departments left up to the police commissioner or the police chief, and that's exactly where it should be.
When you say you never had enough, is the 1,250 number correct, or do you not know the specific number?
Well, I'm not going to get tangled into numbers. We can have a side conversation afterwards about the numbers, but we do not have the number of patrol officers that exist to effectively staff the 4 days on, 3 days off. That's why we spend $1.6 million in overtime every pay period. But again, I'm sending 100 police officers this month back to the 9 patrol districts. Will that be enough to eliminate overtime and ease all the concerns about manpower? No. but it's certainly a commitment that I'm making in good faith because I'm not tone deaf to the concerns that have been articulated by Gene and others.
Where are those other 100 officers coming from? What divisions? And why weren't they identified prior to now?
So Jane, they all do very important work. So patrol's very important work, investigations are important, examining recruiting and applicant investigations is important, compliance,
checks.
internal affairs is important. All these people do very, very important work. So I'm taking them from their important work and I'm dedicating them to the important work that needs to be done in patrol in our communities, quite frankly, because that's a priority that needs to be accomplished right now. We think about staffing each and every day. I make decisions each and every day about deployments and who goes where and who does what. And at this moment, it just seems the right thing to do to enhance patrol staffing as we continue to try to fill academy classes with more people and more often.
Just to follow up with that, they're in the budget of this year, the FY17 budget back in the spring. I mean, there's budget documents that say that BPD was going to move officers from desk duty to patrol to make up for the freezing of positions, et cetera, to save money and to pay for the pay raise, et cetera. So did that happen sometime between then and now? Have there been officers moved off of desk duty in the past 9 months since those budget documents were drawn up?
So, Jane, there have been officers moved off of desk duty to patrol. There's also been efforts and direction that I have given to take from patrol to enhance robbery investigations. We quadrupled the number of robbery detectives, and we did, in fact, quadruple the number of robbery detectives. And we've added detectives to homicide and non-fatal shootings because we have to get the closure rate up. Remember I said that the murder victim, the average number of arrests that a murder victim has in Baltimore is 11. 11. So they're just as likely to be killed as they are to kill. And unless we close cases in this city, those folks who are committing violence will do it again and again and again. So it's important to staff patrol, it's important to staff investigations. These are all decisions that I have to make on a daily basis, and it's always dependent upon the number of resources. And the number of resources that you see on paper and something as sterile as a budget document don't reflect the realities of people who are on light duty, people who are on medical duty, people who are on military leave, and people who are suspended. That's a daily fluctuation.
And let me add this as well, Jenny. There's no freeze on hiring patrolmen. There will be no freeze on hiring patrolmen. And again, if you juxtapose that against the overtime, it makes no sense not to hire. And as I said earlier, patrol will never be an area in this administration that we will freeze positions that are open to be hired. And that's why I said Baltimore, we're hiring, as well as in sanitation, as well as the folks who answer the call in the fire department. That will never be the case in this administration.
Commissioner Cheryl Stolberg, you talked about 100 BGF members being indicted in 2016 and that the violence spilling out to other organizations. Can you just talk a little more about the depth of the gang problem in Baltimore? How many other drug organizations are there? And is this traceable to the unrest of 2015? Well,
the drug organizations in Baltimore outnumber the gangs, but the gangs are all involved in the drug trade. So within Baltimore's largest gang, and they're relatively unsophisticated, they're very violent, they're very undisciplined, the Black Guerrilla family has been responsible for a disproportionate amount of violence throughout our city, particularly on the west side of our city. So we've been effective in indictments on the federal side and the state side, but not effective enough because, and the mayor talks about this all the time, the next generation of gangbangers is just standing ready to take the place of those that we pick off. So that's where outside law enforcement entities come into play. It's not just enough to arrest your way out of something. You'll never arrest your way out of something, but there's got to be other fixes put in place to do something to otherwise get that next generation from choosing that life.
And how much is that traceable to what happened here in 2015?
No, the Black Guerrilla family's been around Baltimore for a long time. Drug organizations, heroin has been a problem in Baltimore since the mid '60s.
So if I could just follow up with one sort of national question, you've probably answered this from my local colleagues. The core reason for this crime level, when Americans look at this city and they see the outrageous number of murders here, they wonder, what's going on here? What is the explanation?
Well, if it was just one reason, we would have solved it by now.
Right, but it's not one thing, and when you look around the nation and communities where crime is spiking, it ties back to economic issues. It ties back to the 10,000 folks who leave our institutions every year, that we don't accommodate them in the way that we should. We got 3,000 folks sleeping on our streets in our communities who are homeless. We're not tracking, and I went to a coordinating council on criminal justice meeting. I thought one of the most powerful groups in the city that meet for exactly 1 hour. And I know I raised so many questions that they didn't get to finish their presentations. But the question becomes, when somebody gives you an address and they're getting ready to leave the institution, are you tracking to make sure that they're going to that specific address and they're getting the services that they need? Are we expunging people's records, or are we keeping people from becoming employed, and are we working together to make sure that we employ people? And many of our young people who get caught up in criminal activity aren't just there because they want to be there. Some of them are there because they need to work, not just in a summer jobs program. So what are our year-round jobs programs that are going to deal with these young people every day who need to go to work? We've got homeless individuals who are coming to our schools, trying to get an education, trying to help take care of their families, and we need to figure out what we need to do to make sure that the problems that they're facing are not luring them into the drug trade.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Commissioner, how much decline have you seen in the overall number of arrests that were made in last year, 2016, compared to other years?
So there's been a decline. I don't have those specific numbers in front of me. To me, it's always about the quality of arrests. And, are we focusing on people who hurt other people, right? So the old days of discretionary arrests, the contempt of cop arrest for the loitering, the failure to obey a lawful order, the trespassing, the disorderly conduct, I'm less interested, very much so, less interested in those types of arrests. I'm more so interested in closing cases of murder and robbery and burglary and sex offense. So that's our focus. It's the quality of arrests for people who harm others.
So
Here,
can you talk to me?
there was a question up here.
Geographic zones that you were speaking of, and how is it different than previous administrations that used to call it cops on dots, and how that wasn't very effective back a few administrations ago, and they changed their policing schedule. So what are these geographic zones, and how does that work? How do you envision that working next year?
So we spent a lot of time in the last quarter of 2016 actually identifying these geographic zones. And the geographic zones are not something that I'm going to divulge, but they wouldn't surprise anyone in this room. They're places where people are disproportionately hurt and they're victims of violence. So what's different this time is I'm dedicating full-time teams to these zones. They're going to stay there throughout 2017. They're not going to get distracted. We'll have far less distractions in 2017 than we did in 2016, and they're going to be responsible for meaningful productivity, case closures, and good arrests in those zones. And we're going to work with the State's Attorney's Office and U.S. Attorney to get there.
What is the level of vacancy right now within the police department, and is this much higher than normally?
Well, take 2011 as a benchmark. We're down several hundred from 2011. So I think you heard the mayor talk about her commitment to police, fire, and sanitation, and that it's going to be a commitment that we're going to live up to. And we just need, again, we need to get people who are interested in this profession, interested in Baltimore. I've been effective with the state. I serve as the vice chair of the Maryland Police Standards and Training Commission, and I introduced an amendment to COMAR to alter the drug hiring standard for marijuana. That should take effect by spring at the latest. So it's the #1 disqualifier of young people to become police officers. So we think we're going to have a much better recruiting year in Baltimore in 2017.
How many officers are suspended right now? Just
Half the number than when I took over. I think we're up in the late high 30s.
high 30s?
Yep.
Right here.
You have two councils, police district councils last night who recommended that you ask the legislature to have the state police patrol the JFX. Now, this would require legislation and it happens. But would you consider that as a more permanent solution to patrol areas, freeing up officers to go to the neighborhoods rather than responding to crashes on the JFX?
Well, yeah.
We don't want them walking the jail.
Yeah, I'd have to look at how often our police officers are responding to crashes on the JFX. I think the Maryland State Police patrol I-83 outside the Beltway, but I'd have to look at the data to become more familiar with that proposal. But, the Maryland State Police has been a great partner with the Baltimore Police Department, and they're the first people that I call every time we have protests that will exceed our own capacity to deal with them. So they've been a great partner, and I think they're going to continue to be a great partner.
And just a quick follow-up on the DOJ agreement, is this a matter of days before it's reached? I know, the clock is ticking on the current administration, but I mean, is this something that we're going to expect this to be finalized next week?
We're looking at it. That's my hope.
Looking at next week?
We're looking at it. I mean, they worked last night till about midnight, so, that's our hope.
If,
Close the gap
if the.
so Loretta Lynch can come on by.
If the 410 shift schedule is problematic because you don't have enough officers, what are you looking specifically to go back to or to go to in your negotiations with the union? And how is that going to be different from previous shift structures that also had the department spending tens of millions of dollars on overtime on an annual basis?
Well, let me just play with this just a little bit, and I'm gonna throw it over to the commissioner. You probably work 5 and 2. That's what I work. Well, actually, I work more than that. I work 7 because I love this job so much. So, I want our police officers to love their jobs too, and I know that they do because they're committed. And so, I think, and I'm not the expert here, that 5 and 2 works better. I think you're more the expert on what works for you in terms of assigning those shifts.
So,
that's my take on it.
And I'll say this, Kevin, the language that the FOP chose to use, particularly tipping point, I find that offensive. I know that I've spoken to several of my commanders who find that offensive, and I rode with a patrol shift in the Eastern District a few nights ago at night, and I was so encouraged and motivated to be around a group of young police officers with effective leadership out there doing their job. So I think they find it offensive. We're out here doing the best we can in a very challenging profession. We simply have a shift schedule that doesn't work for the number of people we have. That's not personal, right? It's not personal at all. So I think the negotiations of the shift schedule being in my hands where it belongs, and then the 2 civilians on the trial board are certainly not things that are too much to ask.
Commissioner, that sounds like the FOP is running the department, though. Is that true?
No, I'm running the department, Stephen.
No.
It just sounds like because you're saying the FOP.
No,
and
no,
you can't
no.
change the shifts and you
No,
can't change it without.
they're not running the
approval.
department though.
We're just
That's
talking
why
about
we're
the schedule.
standing here.
Okay,
They're not running the department.
just thought I'd ask.
But back to my question of if it is a 5-2 structure, do you have ideas for operating on a 5-2 structure that won't put the department tens of millions of dollars over its budget in overtime every year, which is the way it's been for multiple years? I mean, you inherited that structure.
Sure.
Both of you. But can you speak to that? Is that something you're thinking through? Are you looking for ways that will be better in the future?
All of the above. That was pretty good. Pretty good.
Commissioner, to clarify.
Well, throw in, Jane and Kim, throw in the civilianization plan, because our organization, again, we're the 8th largest in the country, we have a disproportionate amount of sworn police officers performing civilians' jobs. So it's more than just a shift schedule.
Right.
It's a shift schedule, it's bigger academy classes more often, and it's the civilianization plan to get civilians performing jobs that civilians can perform, thereby freeing up police officers work patrol. We can't snap our fingers and make it happen overnight, but it all starts with a commitment.
Your strategy that you say for 2017 of zoned enforcement and discretionary teams of detectives is very familiar to those of us who've been around a bit, with the Violent Crime Impact Division and the VISA teams in the mid-2000s that were responsible for a lot of complaints and ultimately disbanded by your predecessor.
Right.
What's the safeguard that doesn't result in the same practices that really got the department in a lot of trouble?
So Jane, because it's so familiar to you, I just urge you not to draw parallels between this strategy and the strategies of the past. We were down in 2016, 37% in excessive force complaints. Our lawsuits filed against the Baltimore Police Department were the lowest that they had been in the last several years. I'm doubling the number of training hours for all Baltimore police officers, and they'll particularly focus on de-escalation and characteristics of an armed person. There's different leadership in place at those mid-level ranks. So I understand that it may be I don't know, enticing to make those parallels, and it may read well to folks who, want to make those parallels. But the fact of the matter is, we will win the crime fight if we can do better in the areas that are most prone to violence. That's what we do. We go to areas most prone to violence. We effectively and constitutionally police those areas and work with our citizens and do better. Just because something failed in the past doesn't mean.
Commissioner Davis, Ed Erickson from City Paper, what is the exact clearance rate on the murders for 2016 this year?
39.4.
39.4.
Or
How's that
39.6.
compared to the year before and the year before that?
So the year before was 30.4. So we improved, and I actually said this earlier, we improved by 8 percentage points in our murder clearance rate. So you'll
What is your optimal goal, or what would you like to get to?
100%.
But a realistic goal.
Well, you look at big cities, and there's, depending on, the statistics are a dangerous thing. So if you look at America's 18,000 police departments, if you look at the police departments that serve populations of 500,000 or more, the national clearance rate in recent years has hovered around 45%. That's where Baltimore has been the last few years. So we dipped to 30% in 2015. We jumped back up to 39%. We're not proud of that. We need to continue to work harder to get that up there. I'm adding more detectives in the homicide. So we need to get to a place where the closure rate is significantly better, because again, this is Baltimore, and we didn't have 318 killers last year, right? We had 318 murders. We didn't have 318 killers. We had people who killed multiple people time and time again, and a number of them are still not being held accountable for that violence.
Mayor, have we figured out how to pay for the consent decree?
Have we figured out how to pay for
How to
it?
pay for, what, the 5 million or what?
I haven't gotten anything yet. I have to look at it first.
Okay.
When you're under a DOJ, we'll figure it out. And I've said this to the public sector and to the private sector, that, we're not gonna be able to do this by ourselves. I'll be talking to the state, I'm talking to my federal partners, I'm also talking to private industry, because, some of this is hardware. Hardware is, is a one-time cost, and, I'm gonna go ask for the money that we need. I'm not shy about asking for money, and I won't be shy about making sure that my police department is well-equipped and has what it needs. I'm also not shy about reorganization where it is needed. We have some agencies that aren't effective in some ways, and we have some agencies that are dedicated to doing certain things that I think that we can regroup around. But I'm waiting to see the complete report. And, the numbers are not as concerning to me, the cost is not as concerning to me as us getting it done.
How do you guard against any unreasonable expectations?
I got good people negotiating.
One more question.
Sure, this is a sort of a philosophy question. So in the 1990s, when there was the huge crack epidemic in Baltimore, had over 300 murders every year, the remedy that the former mayor of Malley came up with was zero tolerance. We're going to, and that was the policing philosophy of the time, right? It was what done in New York and elsewhere. And that did drive crime down. Then Commissioner Bielefeld and others said we're going to targeted enforcement. And that also had crime go down. And we've seen fewer and fewer arrests, and actually shrunk a very large police department by about 400 positions. Now we see arrests are at a very low level, policing is lower, and crime is back up. What is your philosophy? Well, murders and violent crime and robberies. In comparison to the lows, how do you evaluate those data sets, and have we shrunk the police department too far? Are there too few arrests? What do you think?
So that is a philosophical question.
Yeah.
Here's a philosophical question for me. So here's what
how do you see the role of policing? Yes.
Okay, so here's what I think. As I said, I too believe that we are not staffed as we should be in patrol. But I don't believe that arrests are the answer. I've read story after story, book after book, and I've seen over the decades that just arresting people does not solve the problem. And that's why I think collaboration is really important. I want to get to the young people before they get involved in criminal activity. I want to make sure that recreational facilities are available, but more importantly, I want to make sure that those who need to work get to work. I think that that's a real issue in our city. And so we're going to be focused on that. You know, I've talked to private industry about how they can help. I'm talking to the Office of Employment Development about what we need to do in those neighborhoods, in those communities. But I also think that everybody has to play a role. But this is not about increasing arrests. And I think that's why the training that the Commissioner is talking about, how we de-escalate, how we interact with people who have mental health issues, people who have problems that we need to deal with, and it's how we wrap our services around those individuals who are in need. We still have too many board-up houses in our city. We still have too many people sleeping on our streets, and we've got to put our resources into helping our people to live better lives in our city. That's a pretty good philosophical response.
Commissioner, do you agree with that? Is that your
Of course he does. Of course he does.
So really,
Have your own philosophy.
what happened in the 1990s, the response from American policing in the 1990s, not just Baltimore, but American policing was zero tolerance. It was a very violent time, a time like none other, and that decision, with the benefit of hindsight, drove gaps between the cops and the community. So while we may have enjoyed a few years of violent reductions, it obviously hasn't been sustained. And things aren't sustained when they're not done right. So I always find it interesting when folks who are outside of this profession for several years look back with great clarity and 20/20 vision and point to a singular year as that must have been the year where we got it right. Well, if that was the year that we got it right, then the next year would have gotten a little bit better. And the year after that would have gotten a little bit better. So I think we have to find a way forward that sustains both crime reductions and community trust in the police department. And that's harder work than zero tolerance policing.
That was a good philosophical answer. Thank you, everybody.
Across the street at DPW, can you